So yeah, this debt, it's always going to fall on the weak links in society. And who are the weak links? They're financially weak, the poor. Okay, that's who is being discriminated against. That's who's going to be picked on to pay the debt through. The only idea they have is continued currency debasement by raising. That's always the answer. We need more money, right? All these government agencies. We got the recycling firm locally here saying, "Hey, we're stop shipping stuff to China, so it's not so easy for us anymore to separate all this stuff." And we're going to have to pass that expense on, right? So they're going to debase your to pay for your recycling bin. You got to pay more. Okay, this is the answer to everything. Is just raise your prices. Well, and people say, well, duh. What do you expect them to? They can't absorb the cost. Well, that's what I would say about the minimum wage worker over the last 5.5 decades. Okay, what about them? Do you think they don't need a cost of living adjustment if their expenses keep going up? Because that's what the complaint is. Well, our expenses are going up, and we're getting half as much here, and so what's the answer? Well, get paid half as much, accept half as much, cut your pay in half. Well, we can't do that. Our cost of living is X, so we need X pay to pay the cost of living. Well, isn't that the same complaint that a minimum wage worker would have over the last? How is that unreasonable? How is that radical? How is that illogical? You see, so I mean, folks, we're in it really deep, okay? And I don't have a lot of faith, okay, for good reason, just from empirical evidence, observing over these many decades, okay, that humanity is going to be able, by some law, some voting somebody in, it's just not going to happen, okay, that we're going to see the changes. Unless we the people gain control over the issuance of currency, literally, we have to be the ones that oversee it. We have to be the check and balance. Okay, we have to be the ones that add accountability to this mixture here. Okay, to where we're going to have sound money. But I don't see how we're going to extricate ourselves from this thing. I think that we're way too far down the rabbit hole here. We're in it really deep. It's up to our noses and it smells bad. Okay, and the lucky ones see it because they're going to be least traumatized by the giant events that need to take place in order to realize changes, to actualize the changes I'm talking about. Or like on a biblical level, it's monumental. It's sea change proportion, unprecedented in all of history. That's the kind of changes we need to take place. And there's a reason they could happen more now than any other time in history, is that accumulated knowledge and wisdom on the earth. So everybody's got to be aware. And if you understand just basic, rudimentary, fundamental economic principles of supply and demand capitalism, then you'll understand what progress means and why we've been going the opposite direction, why we've been regressing, okay, all these decades, why the wealth of the people, the working class people particularly, has been stole out from under their noses, okay, and who's been doing it, okay, the same crap for thousands of years. It's the same element, the same caliber, the same mentality of elitists that have been ruling the world, ruling over the affairs of men for thousands of years now, that are still doing it today. And this is how Jesus explained it. And until he returns, whether that's a metaphor, an allegory, or whatever, this end of the age and beginning of a new age, we're going to have issues. And until he empowers just regular people, just godly people, okay, empowers them to go out and to effect change, we're going to have the same old song and dance. The debasement of the currency, they're going to push the envelope as far as they can get away with it, and debase our currency and just try to steal as much loot as they can, okay, before things change, of real value too. You notice how expensive gold maintained its worth over all these years. We conflate worth, value, price, and cost, and nobody knows what the hell they're talking about. These are terms we're told, hey, you believe this about, well, high prices are bad, but we're not talking about high prices. We're talking about high value, right? Like it's a good thing. So your house went up in value. Oh, it doesn't cost more for the next guy out there to buy it. Don't worry about it. That's his problem. No, focus on value. It's good for you. If it's good for you, understand it just, you understand how we've been screwed up, okay, is on purpose, by design, with a plan, a diabolical plan of deception, delusion, oblivion. It can't work. A Ponzi scheme, a pyramid scheme has never worked in history. It never will, not forever. And that's what they're trying to get away with here. And until we put our feet down collectively and individually, we're not going to see changes. We're not going to see a lower cost of living tax. So I'm just saying, I don't have a lot of faith in man. I've got to have faith in God. And I've got to just let go and let God in at some point. But I've got to keep on fighting the good fight, speaking truth to power, trying to educate people, enlighten them and empower them about basic economic principles so that they can't be, nobody can debate them and win because they know and cut to the chase. I mean, if people want to play little games of minutia with you, just talk, hey, whose planet is this anyhow? How do you feel about God? What do you feel about who he owns and what he owns? And do we have a right? How do you feel about equality? Oh, you don't believe in equality. Okay. Well, you've got no clout then on this matter because then you're in the same camp with those that believe in extreme inequality, that you believe in perpetual wealth imbalance, growing wealth imbalance, and that's okay, and madness and just illogic, sick logic. And, see, you can debate anybody if you know the things I know. And you'll be able to pick out the righteous from the wicked right away in a conversation. And most people, I don't care if they're liberal or conservative in their minds, you'll be able to be on the same page with them. This is the way to heal the divide in our land through peacemaking. Jesus said, look, the peacemakers will be called sons of God. We all have an opportunity to be sons and daughters of God. Who would want to turn that up? Okay, so let's work together here for the good of all of us, for my good, for your good, for all of our good. It's one and the same. Yeah, a lot of people that profess Christianity superficially, they never get into the deeper plan of God and ultimately what's about to happen, this end of the age, beginning of a new age, how things are going to change dramatically and profoundly, almost to where you can't recognize them. Now, that's why I say, imagine a world entirely without money and functioning beautifully. Total prosperity, total freedom, total security, total harmony, contentment, total, complete. That's what's coming. Once God separates the wicked from the righteous, that's what you have to look forward to. And you can do it, so it'll be less traumatic. That's what's coming. Those are the sea changes I'm talking about. The end of the age, the beginning of a new age, it's upon us. We're at the brink. We're at the precipice. It's imminent. OPEC, the MSM reporting on OPEC fixing prices. They're a special interest group, of course. But, they say, well, there's other factors besides supply. They don't want to talk about that. And what in the hell is America exporting oil for when the prices are this high? You see, none of this makes sense. We're being manipulated. Everything's being manipulated. But they don't want to talk about it. They say the other factors, but they won't talk about the manipulation factor. That, of course, shareholders, they want to get more money. So, yeah, they'll do whatever they can. They want higher prices. If they can get higher prices, then they're going to collude together with other oil-producing nations to rig prices, all those that have an interest, and all the shareholders are lumped in there. But they don't want to talk about that. They don't want to point out. They don't want you educated. They want you just invest in this or invest in that, this, that. It just believe this way, that way, and just believe there's no hope here, and this is a lost cause over here, and don't even fight this fight. I mean, it's lost. It's, forget it. So, I mean, they just want to obfuscate everything. They don't want you to understand. Confusion, conflation, and just messing everything up in our minds is what they want. They just don't want you empowered. And if you are ignorant, if you are confused, then you lack empowerment. I gave this path analogy last week, but I was talking about walking along a path, and if you know that there's a big rut that could injure somebody and they're about to fall into it, and you're walking on the path at night, you know about it, they don't. moonlit night, say you don't have any flashlights, right? But and the hole, the rut would be obscured. You're going to warn your friend, okay? But no, the point I was really trying to make, by extension, you're going to warn even your enemy, okay? We don't want anybody else's blood on our hands or on our head. And in order not to have other people's blood on our hands and our head, metaphorically speaking, we must correct them when we believe they're wrong. We have that duty to our own conscience. Okay? So it doesn't matter if it's your friend, your foe, or anybody in between that you are warning about the pit they're about to fall into. You have a duty, an obligation, a responsibility as a fellow human being, okay, God's servant, to do that. So, there's no weaseling out of this thing for any of us. Locally, we had this Redding up in Redding, Shasta County, adjacent county. Well, it goes through Tehama, I guess, first, and then Shasta from Butte. But he, locally enough, it's about 60 miles to Redding from Chico. But he was 54 years old, the fire chief, and he just died suddenly. They didn't even say what he died from, but that's pretty young, It makes you think. At my age, 60, I think, man, I've lived a lot longer than a lot of people that have died of natural causes, and I doubt very much the fire chief was a smoker either. But a lot of people die young and that aren't smokers. I'd like to see what his diet was comprised of. Oh, there was a house the mainstream media put on the news, a little 2-minute blurb about this dilapidated, falling apart house somewhere near San Francisco. And they put the house up for sale for $1 million. And this thing's a real tear her downer. You're just going to rip it down and put up something else. This house sold for it was put on the market for $1 million, and it sold for $1.3 million approximately because of all the bids on it. And people wonder why gentrifiers are hated. Okay, let me tell you, somebody is going to build that house, probably 2-3-story house there, that they're going to try to sell for at least a couple of million, right? So these are your investors, your flippers. And those houses, those fixer-uppers, are the ones that are coveted by a struggling young couple seeking their first starter home to enter middle-class home ownership. And you're just going to say it's okay to take it away under the guise of capitalism? All that's been going on in America in the last 55 years with real estate, this wealth imbalance, what's going on here. These criminals using OPM, other people's money, just borrowing from the banks. They socialize the debt and they privatize the profits into their own pockets. We're spending $50 billion a year on Section 8 housing, supposed to go to house those that can't afford to pay their own housing costs. It's a welfare subsidy. And it winds up at the end of the day in the pockets of guys like Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, his ilk, his caliber, those types. Okay? Do you understand how this thing works? And the problem just gets worse and worse. The wealth disparity gets worse and worse. Poverty grows. Home ownership shrinks. We've lost the middle class. And it gets harder and harder to crack that nut, harder and harder to reach that bar. And a lot of people say, just go along with the flow. It's a path of least resistance. Just keep going. Don't just shut up. Don't complain. Don't whine. You're powerless. What can you do? Well, I can at least bitch and moan about it and say, this has got to change, and it will. I guarantee you. When God's will is implemented on the earth, it's going to look one hell of a lot different. Alex Jones is very good, and a lot of his reporters, at denouncing the stupidity of socialism and pointing out how it doesn't work. But does he talk about how this is a plan, that they're trying to besmirch the name of capitalism, right? Defame capitalism, and this is how you create this communist sympathy. That's what this rabid communism in the land. That's what's doing it. That's the plan. Okay, you give capitalism a bad name unless you talk about that and defend true capitalism and point out how all we've had is crony capitalism, talk about what progress is relative to these things, and educate people that are leaning socialist and communist even, then what are you doing? I mean, you can't just bitch and moan. What are your solutions to ending the wealth imbalance that keeps growing? To stopping the poverty, to stopping the inability to enter middle class home ownership in California? What's your answer? What are we going to do? How are we going to extricate ourselves from this and turn this ship around? Okay, what are we going to do? I don't believe in socialism either. I don't believe in tax and spend, taking from the haves to give to the have-nots. It never works, never will. The Robin Hood thing might sound good on its face, but we all know it doesn't work. But what are your solutions?